Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming today. Especially that in the next session, I think at the plenary, we're going to have Dr. Oz. So we are here in tough competition. So today, we are going to talk about nanotechnology, or the reemergence of nanotechnology. It's a mature field, I would say. Wouldn't you agree, Matthew?
Well, it's both mature and completely new, depending on how you look at it. I mean, the using nanoparticles, using materials and dispersing them and looking at their properties, I think that's been around now for at least since the Nanotech Initiative in the United States in 2000, probably starting much before that.
Yeah.
But things like self-assembly and creating nano machines, I think is still in its early days, but exciting stuff starting to happen. What's your opinion on that?
I completely agree with you. I think you and I both started in the field around the same time, almost 25 years ago, like you said, when the U.S. National Nanotechnology Initiative was founded. I think it was in the Bill Clinton administration.
Yeah, at the end of the Clinton administration.
Exactly.
And Bush signed it, I think.
Right, and it's the one thing that both Republicans and Democrats could agree on, right, is to continue to fund the National Nanotechnology Initiative, despite it seemingly being a mature field, right? But I think you and I were talking, and we both agree that we're in the new phase, really. In the beginning phases, it was how do you control the structure at this size regime? It's a very small size regime. How do you control that structure? And how do you even see it? But today, and why were we interested? It's because of the unique properties, the quantum properties, the physical properties that arise that are not found in nature today. We have to, as human, make them. And then today it's all about capitalizing, commercializing on these properties. And really, innovation is an economic act. Innovation is an economic act. And I feel like I know that is the stage we're at today in nanotechnology, the commercialization stage. And I mean, maybe some of you, if you're in this audience today, you probably are already sold and love the idea. That's why you're here. But one of maybe the few things that people realize, for example, remember in the 90s, the landmines?
Yes.
Right, and very few may know this, but it was nanotechnology that was really saved us from the problem of landmines that killed a lot of people. I remember it was one of the physical entanglement and collective response properties of nanotechnology. And then most recently the pandemic, right? The vaccine was enabled by nanotechnology.
Yeah.
mRNA was around for a very long time, but it was nanotechnology that helped deliver the promise of that.
Yeah, it was such an exciting moment when in such a tragic time, but to see nanotechnology being scaled to the largest degree that it ever had, at least in a biologic sense. I mean, this mRNA encapsulated in a lipid nanoparticle, you had to process it, you had to visualize it, and then suddenly it's in a vaccine.
Right.
And I think it gives us hope that biology and chemistry and this idea wrapped in the word nanotechnology can become a reality.
In a way, I was very relieved at that time because I went to Berkeley, and I remember at that time there were protests against nanoparticles, and nanotechnology was considered the scary thing. And I know, it's true. And it was really, it took a pandemic to get over the fear of injecting ourselves with a nanoparticle, the scary thing. So it was a blessing in disguise, if you will, for the field. A part of me also feels that nanotechnology is an unsung hero. It permeates every industry, you just don't know about it. And it's not really a reemergence, if you will, it's there. It's just that sometimes you don't want to talk about it because it used to be honestly viewed as something that was frightening.
Right. I mean, you remember those great debates back in around 2000, when there was two different sort of versions of what nanotechnology was. It was either going to be something that is so small that it has these different particles. I guess it was defined as anything under 100 nanometers. And that didn't seem so scary. And then there was this Drexlerian idea of molecular self-assembly. and some fights over, whether that would become something that would self-replicate and cause something that they called gray goo. Do you remember gray goo?
Correct. It's almost
so
reminiscent.
I think people got a little confused about what was going on in the real world at the time.
Yeah, it's almost reminiscent of today what we're facing with AI, artificial intelligence. Always a fear of the unknown. I think we're well past that at this point in nanotechnology, I would say, to the point where people are wondering, where is it? Is it emerging? But it permeates every field. Both you and I have companies that base technology is enabled by nanotechnology, right?
Absolutely. I'd love to hear about your company.
Well, as you know, we both come from academia, and our startups and our companies and our commercial efforts are founded by nanotechnology. In my case, one of the companies that I spun out uses gold nanoparticles, really the quantum phenomena of nanotechnology, because Matthew and I were talking about there's two kinds of properties that come about from the nanoscale. One is quantum phenomena, and the other is more physical entanglement or classical mechanics in that case. But the company that I founded a while back now uses surface plasma quantum phenomena, the way electrons behave at that size regime, where you get nanosecond excitement. And in my case, I used it, or our company, not I, to help release fat from fat cells so that you can easily either metabolize them or have them suctioned out. Because we as humans always look to be a better version of ourselves. And one of the, unfortunately, side effects of aging is the redistribution of fat in the body. And so in this particular use, it's just how to remove fat from undesired areas of the body, non-invasively, in a very smooth, aesthetically pleasing manner. Uses in aesthetic medicine. And I think in your case, it's in optical microscopy, but also further in other fields as well.
Yeah, I mean, I started the company to get outside of academia just because I wanted to see these interesting things that were going on in the lab make their way into industry. So by doing microscopy, and we come up with a super resolution microscopy method that was a way to be able to see things, small things over a large area. And if you could see those things, you could start to understand what was going on, and you could start to scale those in manufacturing. And that's really evolved once artificial intelligence came along. And so to me, I call this sort of an industrial collision that started to happen, where nanotechnology and artificial intelligence could work together to actually be able to build things at scale. We started to work with semiconductor companies, certainly consider that in the nano range, but also biochemical companies and biotech companies in general, all sort of fall in a nanotech regime in some regard.
Exactly.
And so scaling those became the desire of the company, and we're now even making little fabs in order to build our own devices. So, it's been an evolution from, yes, to see the future, to build the future, you have to see it, I always used to say, to now actually building that thing.
Correct. I think one of the things, too, that we should touch on is we not only had a difficult time making things at the nanoscale regime, but then making them in a reliable manner, reproducible manner, that can then be commercialized, because you cannot commercialize a technology that is irreproducible or has low quality control. So that's in making, but also seeing in the nanoscales. So those were the early days when Matthew and I were very heavily in the academic world, is how do you see things at that size regime? And today, how do you commercialize it, right? And I should mention, if you're here today, you probably know that this year, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry was awarded to 3 chemists for their work in nanotechnology, for exactly making small particles, quantum dots they're called. So if you recall in our discussion, we talked about 2 sides of properties that you get from the nanosize scale, which is the quantum phenomena, which is what quantum dots do, which won the Nobel Prize this year, but also on the other side, the physical classical mechanical side of the nanoscale regime. And again, for example, you've heard of quantum computing, right? That does rely on the nanoscale phenomena. So although it is a mature field, there's a lot to be done, and it's so mature now that it's a given. It permeates every aspect, from water, from cleaning water, which you and I have discussed, right?
Yes.
Making sure we have access to clean water. I believe 1 in 10 people in the world does not have access to clean water, and today, nanotechnology is used to allow access to clean water. And more importantly, today we are unfortunately experiencing war and peace, as we always do as humanity. And again, the uses of nanotechnology are most felt in that field, right? Like I mentioned earlier, just the way that we solve the problem of landmines post-war has been to use nanotechnology. And also in peace, in terms of detection of explosive and counterterrorism, using nanotechnology, and detecting counterfeits. You may or may not know this, but they're used in your dollar bills, or $100 bills, excuse me, not in the dollar bill. Used in passports to authenticate them and such. Not only in our companies. We didn't mention the name of our companies, by the way.
Oh, yeah. My company's called Nanotronics, and this is sort of a subsidiary of the company that's building these little fabs. It's called QFabs.
QFabs. And I'm faculty at UC San Diego. Several of our inventions in the lab have been licensed and commercialized by large pharma, like Merck and Pfizer, but the spin-out startup is called Elux Medical. If you're interested, you can look them both up, Nanotronics and Elux Medical. And I think we have enough time to maybe field some questions. What do you think,
that would be
Matthew?
great.
Yeah? Since you guys are diehards being here today.
I don't know. About these fabs, yeah. So there was a chip shortage recently, but there are people think of computer chips as being central processors in computers, but there are so many things out there that require different properties. That we call them wide bandgap semiconductor materials that have good electrical properties. And just sort of my dream has been, since I was very young, is to get to the point where you can build things on not only small things, but build them at small facilities. Eventually making something like a Star Trek replicator. I mean, I really have had this sort of fantasy, and it hasn't gone away, even though I'm almost 50. But cube fabs are a way of not spending $50 billion to build a semiconductor facility, but rather to spend a small amount of money, a fraction of that, a fraction of the size, and distribute them around the world. And that's a step towards having a replicator, because it's trying to produce the best yields possible, the best energy efficiency possible, and ultimately a device that is used for things like electric vehicles and things like water purification. Things like photodetectors for evaluating the climate, for climate change. All of this stuff happens because of the shrinking of the size of what we're doing and the effects that you get from that.
Correct. So I think we have a few, points that we were supposed to, I think, discuss with our audience today. And I wanted to maybe... Well, we can take another question, I think. There's still some time. No.
No.
Go ahead.
Defense industry. Hello, hi.
You want to introduce yourself?
My name is Badr Al-Isa. Thank you very much for the nice talk. I wanted to ask more about the usability of nanotechnology in the defense industry, if that's something...
Well, would you like to answer that first, and I'll add to it later?
I never like to talk about defense. I'm a peaceful guy.
True. Nanotechnology is very heavily funded by, at least in the U.S., by biodefense because, as I said, it's a size regime that we did not, as humankind, have access to because we couldn't make things in that size regime. It's actually a size regime in which biology operates. Viruses and proteins are in the nano-size regime. As I mentioned, that size regime, if you studied physics, anybody in class? Do you remember physics in high school is classical mechanics? Sorry, I'm going to geek out. And then beyond that, it's in quantum mechanics. So quantum phenomena we did not have access to. It offers us electronic and optical properties. We're able to see and detect things that we have not previously been able to see and detect in nature. So of course, the defense and military applications definitely always look for those properties so that they can further their causes. One of the things early on that was the goals of certain defense proposals and applications is using them just for camouflage because, again, the optoelectronic properties at that size regime, you can create almost like not a camouflage that color-wise, but rather mirroring the environment around you so that you don't see. And so many more, including blocking chemical weapons, using both quantum phenomena and also the classical mechanical phenomena of the collective response. Sorry, it's a bit of a geeky answer, but that was the very first initial heavy funding of the field, and still is. But today, the focus is, again, innovation is an economic act, and we are today in the innovation phase of nanotechnology, and there's a lot more emphasis on taking what we have built, which is making things at that size regime, seeing things at that size regime, and implementing them in a variety of industries, in quantum computing, in artificial intelligence, in sustainability for clean water, in textiles, for example, creating textiles that are weatherproof, creating homes that are weatherproof, and the list goes on and on and on. And in the military, sorry, I have to say this because I think it's a clever use. In the military, one of the uses was to be able to, you know how Spider-Man crawls up buildings? So actually, that is also a quantum phenomena that can be done using nanotechnology.
Yes.
Dr. Putnam, what products does your company produce?
So our company started by producing imaging devices, and we still do. So we look over large areas, and we use artificial intelligence to look at anomalies and features and defects in order to give feedback to engineers and scientists so that they can improve their process. Eventually, we had an AI running an entire factory, like this cybernetic unit that sits above a factory and changes properties and changes conditions on reactors and other things that produce these materials. Now, what we're doing with these cube fabs, which just asked a question about, we're using this material called gallium oxide, which has these really amazing electric properties. Sort of the best, it's called wide bandgap material. It's really a way of storing electricity better than other methods. So it's good for power devices. It can take more heat. And so we're actually going to be selling these cube fabs so that people can make chips. So we're kind of using AI as an enabler to make these final devices. It's a real range of things now, starting from AI for the imaging and now AI for the actual production of the final product that our company makes.
How does that material compare to graphene?
Totally opposite in some ways, right? So a wide bandgap material, stores electrons for longer, right? It's a way of, if having a charge last longer in a car, or having created, blue LEDs. This is the way graphene works. Graphene is a very strong conductor. And that's a really amazing property, and stronger conductor than anything else that we're using. and it's at scale. So, it doesn't have the ability to switch between an insulator and a conductor in the same way that a normal semiconductor does. Is that how you would describe it?
Yeah, I agree. But again, graphene is used for those same properties in a number of diagnostics and also as sensors, and also used in many military applications in the field. So it is a different phenomena, as Matthew said, but useful as well as other gallium oxides, as well as cadmium selenides, as well as different kinds of lanthanides that have a variety of uses as well for upconversion. And I failed to mention this, but nanotechnology is useful for climate change. Some of the things that people are looking at is using the phenomena of conversion, which is a purely nanophase phenomena, taking infrared light, which is heat, and transferring that to higher energy light that is not heat. So it's used in a variety of applications for sustainability and for war and peace, as I want to say. I think one thing we forgot to mention, Matthew, is we forgot to tell people about ourselves.
Oh my gosh, yes. Please tell people about yourself.
Okay, you want me to tell something about myself?
Yeah, absolutely.
I started in the field similar to you almost 25 years ago. I was interested in it specifically for its potential and its newness. I've been a professor. I call myself a product of the University of California because that's where I got all my education, and then thereon after I've become faculty at University of California, San Diego. And much like Matthew, we've moved along with the maturity of the field, and now both of us are more into the commercialization aspects. But not once you begin into the commercialization aspect, or innovation, as you say, an economic act, you delve deeper and deeper into economic progress and prosperity that tech brings you. And so now I'm on the board of several for-profit and non-profit organizations, such as the FII. I'm one of the trustees of the FII, as well as Tech Cream America, which is another organization in the United States. I'm on the board of both public and private companies in pharmaceutical sciences and several investment funds because, as I said, innovation is an economic act. Where do you put the money? Where is your money worth putting? So that's some of the things that I do today.
Yeah, I've talked a bit about myself already. I did work in a university as well. I'm a polymer rheologist by training, something I'm sure nobody has heard about. But I focused on the way that these polymers, it's the flow of material in polymers. And I focused on how different particles flowed through those polymers and how they reinforced the polymers. At that time, these products were getting these particles were getting smaller and smaller, and there's a bunch of technical reasons why that became both a positive and a challenge to reinforce polymers. So I worked in that field, but I've also spent my whole life in factories. My father had a business, so I worked in since I was 8 years old, working in factories, and so I got to see things at scale that were not nano, that were not precise. And then I wanted to create that, which was precise. So I went from, working with sort of a messy industry, but in the technology side of that, with computation early on, to now trying to make things as atomically precise as possible with artificial intelligence, and doing this in industry at scale. And so therefore starting Nanotronics, and I stepped away from my university job in order to start the company.
Well, you can't be good at everything, so you have to focus on something, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think our time is up, Matthew.
Great.
Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Thank you. It was fun.
I hope you enjoyed the session.